Tonight,
character will end up showing when you actually are in office.
8 days to go in Virginia's close governor's race, the latest from the campaign trail.
It's still bigger than anything we have ever done.
Democrats try to push forward with President Biden's agenda, where things stand with spending and infrastructure, and the role of white nationalism in the American church. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. All right, all tied up with about a week to go before Election Day in Virginia's governor's race. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Tara Merchant. John and Jenna have the night off. Well, the latest polling out today shows a dead even heat between Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe and his Republican rival Glenn Youngkin. The highly watched Virginia's governor race is widely seen as a sign of what is to come in the 2022 midterms. In the last week ahead of Election Day, both candidates are hoping to win over any undecided voters and motivate members of their parties to get to the polls. Whatever edge Democrat Terry McAuliffe had at the start of the campaign appears to be gone.
Well, the idea that this is close should not shock anybody. For 44 straight years, the party that wins the White House, the next year in Virginia, the other party wins the governor's mansion.
The gubernatorial race between Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe is now dead even.
McAuliffe calling in big-name Democrats like former President Obama, who joined him in Richmond on Saturday.
I could not be happier that Terry's back on the ticket. He's persuasive. Don't sit this one out.
The pressure is on. A Monmouth survey showing McAuliffe dropping 5 points since last month. And this comment during a debate.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
McAuliffe then cut short an interview with a local news reporter because he didn't like the questions.
All right, we're over. That's it. That's it.
The Youngkin camp on offense with a new campaign slogan, Parents Matter. And he's demanding the Loudoun County School Superintendent Scott Ziegler and the school board resign. This after a revelation that Ziegler sent an email to the board about an alleged assault by a male student against a female student in a high school bathroom, 1 month before publicly declaring he had no record of such an assault. Youngkin telling Fox News it's outrageous. The email simply confirms what we know, which is we had administrators at a school board who have been covering this up. With the race a virtual tie, both sides are campaigning to faith voters. Kamala Harris endorsing the Democrat in hundreds of churches across Virginia.
I know that you will send Terry McAuliffe back to Richmond.
And conservatives distributing voter guides in others. Pundits say the McAuliffe camp is trying to drum up the enthusiasm that appears to be lacking for his second gubernatorial run. The same Monmouth poll showing Republican voters are more motivated to vote by a 7-point margin.
The Democratic base in Virginia appears to be a bit fatigued from the last election amid the global pandemic. Biden's approval ratings in Virginia have ticked down.
But by the numbers, Youngkin's camp is gaining steam.
This is our moment. Right now.
The biggest swing from independents breaking for Youngkin 48 to 39%. McAuliffe's advantage among women also shrinking by 10 points since last month to a 4-point lead now. And while Joe Biden won Virginia by 10 points in 2020, McAuliffe reportedly told some supporters recently that Biden's falling poll numbers are hurting his campaign, but he walked back his comments a few days later. Biden is set to campaign with McAuliffe tomorrow. Well, meantime, President Biden was in New Jersey today, appearing alongside the Democratic candidate for governor in that state. Governor Phil Murphy is hoping to win re-election in his race against Republican Jack Ciattarelli. Although it hasn't garnered quite as much attention with the media as the Virginia race, Governor Murphy's lead has been dwindling downward. But today, President Biden praised Murphy's leadership during his time in office.
So many of the national challenges we're confronting are areas where you're already leading, whether it's making health care or preschool or college more affordable, providing paid family leave, replacing lead in pipes and protecting public health. So thanks for showing the way, pal.
While in New Jersey today, President Biden pitched his Build Back Better agenda, saying passing infrastructure is crucial for America. For more on this, we turn now to Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, President Biden wants to see his Build Back Better plan in action. So where do things stand with this human infrastructure plan?
Well, Tara, the news from this weekend is that progressive and centrist Democrats appear close to reaching an agreement on that large spending package. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told CNN that this will look different and be smaller than what they originally wanted, but she believes that it still includes most of President Biden's goals. Take a look.
I've said already, we've 90% of the bill agreed to and written. We just have some of the last decisions to be made. It is less than we had was projected to begin with, but it's still bigger than anything we have ever done in terms of addressing the needs of America's working families.
Now, if Democrats really have found an agreement and found a bill that will get every single Senate Democrat to vote for it, then Speaker Pelosi says that if they have an agreement on that larger spending package, then the House could vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill as early as Wednesday of this week.
Abigail, we've talked a lot about Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema holding the key to passing the president's spending plan. What are they hoping for in negotiations?
Well, Senator Manchin has said for months now that he wants the cost to come down. Now, what we were hearing in the summer is that the bill was $3.5 trillion. Manchin and Sinema both said they will not support that. So Manchin, even today, reportedly says that his top line number is $1.5 trillion. But we're hearing that this agreement might be closer to $2 trillion. So the big question is, do they really have something right now? And will Manchin go up from that top line number? A lot of the things that he's worked to cut are some of the climate provisions, particularly those that regulate the coal industry. As a senator representing West Virginia, he was not on board with that. That would very negatively affect his state. So we know some of those provisions have been removed. But progressive Democrats have voiced that they've been particularly upset with Senator Sinema because they say she's not being open with them about what she will support and what she wants to see. So they're still, until the text of the bill is out, until everyone votes for it, I'd say it's not a done deal yet.
Push and pull right to the very end. Abigail Robertson, thank you so much. All right, here now for more, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, Nathan Gonzalez. Nathan, we have seen President Biden's approval rating dropping in recent weeks by quite a bit. How much does he need to win when it comes to infrastructure at this point?
Well, he certainly needs a boost in some form, right? I think he does need a win. He needs something to change that trajectory, but just passing a bill is not going to do it. It's not a magic wand. I think passing something like the infrastructure bill is the first step for Democrats, but then they have to see, do the policies or do the projects contain, does it work? Does it help people in their everyday lives? And part of that is going to be campaigning for it. I mean, it's not an election per se, but I think you'll see President Biden and Democrats get out and try to communicate to voters and convince them that this really is something that will help them. Now, if voters don't buy it and say, no, that this is not helping us at all, then that will keep his job approval rating, closer to where it is now, which is not great for Democrats.
No, it sure isn't. And Biden was, by the way, in New Jersey today campaigning alongside Governor Phil Murphy today. And the race there isn't garnering quite as much media attention as the Virginia governor's race. But what are you paying attention to when it comes to that New Jersey race?
Yeah, well, Joe Biden won New Jersey in the 2020 presidential election by about 15 or 16 points. So I think that's a decent baseline to look at for the margin for this race. If Ciattarelli is able to hold it into single digits or mid-single digits, then I think that tells you that something is a little bit different or something has changed since the race a year ago. And you're absolutely right. As we focus on elections, we tend to watch the money, right? Where is the big spending? Where are the outside groups going? And right now it's all in Virginia, but there's limited data in New Jersey, and that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I think Governor Phil Murphy has the advantage, but there's certainly not as much data out there to tell us what we think is going to happen.
Yeah, and quickly, talking about Virginia just a bit more, what are the messages quickly those candidates need to send to voters who have not made up their minds yet?
Yeah, I mean, Glenn Youngkin is closing on education, closing on parents. The idea that parents need to be, should be involved in the educational choices or what is being taught at school. It's kind of there's a broader message there. And then Terry McAuliffe and Democrats are using President Trump. Right now, Democrats, there are more undecided Democrats or favorable undecided voters that are favorable to Democrats. And if Terry McAuliffe can get those Democrats to vote, then that'll be better for his chances.
And, the lack of motivation among Virginia Democrats, some citing President Biden will be in Northern Virginia tomorrow campaigning for McAuliffe. We got to ask it, does that hurt or help him?
Well, I think it helps. Biden is not overall, he is not great. I think there are some Democrats who wish he was doing better, but I think it's about the contrast. That's what Democrats are trying to focus on. It's not just, do you think Joe Biden is doing a great job or not? It's, do you agree with the direction, the choices that President Biden's going to make, or do you want someone like President Trump? Now, we can argue over whether Youngkin is or is not like Trump, but that's the contrast that Democrats want to have because that benefits them rather than just an up or down referendum on Biden's job performance.
Exactly. We should know a lot more in about a week. Nathan Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. See you next time.
All right. Well, the alt-right on trial. How organizers of the 2017 Unite the Right rally could be held responsible for the deadly violence seen in Charlottesville. After this. Welcome back. Did organizers of the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, conspire to ignite a violent race war? That is the question at the center of a trial 4 years in the making. Jury selection for that case underway today. In the civil lawsuit, 9 people are seeking damages against some of the most notorious white supremacist and nationalist organizations involved in alt-right rally that took place in August of 2017. It was organized to protest the removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee from a Charlottesville park. The rally turned deadly when a man purposely drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing one and injuring dozens more. The plaintiffs, including Charlottesville and some of the other counter-protesters, are seeking damages for physical and emotional injuries. Well, CBN News senior national affairs correspondent Heather Sells joins us now for more. Heather, for many in America, the events that took place in Charlottesville brought white supremacy and white nationalism into the forefront for the very first time. When President Biden launched his presidential campaign, he invoked the Unite the Rally as a threat to the nation like he had never seen before, saying it was a factor in him running for the Oval Office. In the 4 years since Charlottesville, how has white supremacy become a mainstay in American politics?
Yeah, a lot has changed in 4 years, Tara, as you pointed out. And, I think what happened in Charlottesville was just a wake-up call. It was such a moment for the whole country. And then President Biden really trying to tie that moment to the GOP when he started his campaign. But what's interesting is that there really is bipartisan agreement in professional circles around this idea that we really need to be concerned about violent extremism in this country, and particularly far-right violent extremism. And what's interesting is that even the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, under President Trump in October of last year, talked about this. He had the first ever Homeland Threat Assessment. And Tara, here's what he said. He said, "I'm concerned about any form of violent extremism. However, I am particularly concerned about white supremacist violent extremists who have been exceptionally lethal in their abhorrent targeted attacks in recent years." So we know that, both parties are aware that this really is a problem. And we also know that what is going on in our country right now in terms of the pandemic, in terms of people having legitimate grievances about what's going on in their life and being socially isolated, all of that, Tara, makes them really good recruits, sadly, for these violent extremists.
Yeah, so interesting, Heather. Some say what happened in Charlottesville emboldened the alt-right and helped lead to what we saw take place during the Capitol Hill riot on January 6th. What do you make of that argument?
Well, I can't tell you that that there is a direct link there. But what we do know is that at the time, President Trump did not clearly denounce what happened in Charlottesville, although he had people like Senator Gardner at the time, Senator Rubio calling on him to do so. So that created some murkiness and fanned the flames. Also, we know that since then, in the last 5 years, there has been a spike in terms of these attacks. A PBS Frontline study of data from the Center for Strategic and International Studies found more than 400 terror attacks or plots in the U.S. from 2015 to 2000, and that was double the number of attacks in the last decade. So we know these attacks are on the rise, and we know that they are more often being carried out by far-right groups as opposed to far-left groups. So definitely a concern. And also, we just saw a few weeks ago in Virginia, there was a GOP rally in which they had people at that rally pledge allegiance to a flag that was purportedly flown at the January 6th riots. So now you see in GOP circles some glorification of what happened on January 6th. Of course, the Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin denounced that and called that wrong and weird. But you have a lot of tension within the GOP party over how are we going to talk about violent extremism and are we going to accept it?
And Heather, we've got about 30 seconds left. You know, how have some of the ideologies from the alt-right or nationalist movements trickled into the modern church in America?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that there are polls that show a Lifeway poll that says half of all pastors say it's in their church. It's definitely, it's trickled down to the churches. And also, these violent extremists are using Christian language. Most definitely, we even saw that in some of the symbols at the January 6th riot, from a Christian flag to a Jesus 2020 flag. So it's entered the church, and these extremists are using Christian language, and it's definitely an issue for the church, Tara.
Absolutely. Heather Sells, appreciate your insight as always.
You're welcome.
All right, feeding an entire continent, how one farmer in Zimbabwe overcame losing his land to help those in need after this. Imagine having your home and your farm seized by the government and you don't even get a dime for it. That is exactly what happened to Craig Deal in Zimbabwe. Wendy Griffith brings us a story of how he overcame by relying on faith and farming.
Craig Deal was raising his children on the same farm in Zimbabwe he grew up on when in 2003, the unthinkable happened.
Well, Wendy, it was obviously extremely traumatic.
The government forced Craig, his wife, and children to leave their home and farm that had been in his family since 1948 as part of the government's land reform program, an effort to more equitably distribute land between black subsistence farmers and white Zimbabweans of European ancestry. He says he had three choices.
We could fight, we could flee, or we could forgive. And some of my friends, they fought for their land and ended up getting killed for it. Most of my friends left the country, and no answer is wrong. It was just a decision. But we as a family decided that we would pursue the third option, which was to forgive.
He kept going back to one scripture.
That scripture where Jesus says, if a man steals your coat, give him your tunic as well. And so for us, that meant if a man takes your farm, teach him how to farm. And that's what we did. And with that, the pressure lifted. There was a great release over us. And we knew that God had opened up an avenue for us to serve the people and to serve the very least of his brothers through agriculture and bring them the gospel.
Craig moved his family to the city, while about 12 other families took over his house and land. He then joined a group called Foundations for Farming. There, he began to teach the new owners, as well as other small-scale farmers, a unique way of farming that God revealed to the group's founder, Brian Oldreive.
He went with a childlike faith into virgin bush, into virgin forest, and he sat there with a childlike faith and asked God, teach me how to farm. And the two things that he saw is that there's no inversion tillage in nature. And the next thing he saw, there was this beautiful mulch cover that covers the forest floor. And that's actually God's mechanism for feeding the soil and protecting the soil. And so he went back to his farm and he literally tried it just without any tillage and no burning, which is contrary to the conventional way of farming. And he immediately got outstanding results, like a 10-time increment in yield. And so he knew that it worked. And he started then to grow it bigger and bigger. He knew that God had given him this revelation, not for himself, but to extrapolate across the continent of Africa to the rural farmers, the hurting, the poor ones around the continent.
The success of the zero-tillage technique caught the attention of the Zimbabwe government, which endorsed their method. And in 2020, the country experienced its first food surplus in 2 decades.
The food production has jumped 4 times, between 3 and 4 times are the official estimates of the food increment in year 2020.
The country's main crop, corn, tripled with the method. And now Foundations for Farming teaches the technique all over the world, with the main goal of sharing the gospel.
80% of what we teach is the heart. You will never get a behavior change in the village until you've had a heart change. And so that is where Jesus comes in. It's using agriculture as an entry point for the gospel.
Even with all the success, the Zimbabwe government never offered Craig any compensation for his home, his land, or his time teaching. But he says the way God provided, he wouldn't change a thing.
We have a saying in Foundations for Farming is that once I had a farm in Africa, but now Africa is my farm.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Finally, tonight, when dads show up, it makes a difference. And that is what happened at a Louisiana high school after an outbreak of violence. CBS News reported these dads on duty decided to get involved at Southwood High School in Shreveport, Louisiana. About 40 of them take different shifts at the school. They greet the students in the morning and help foster a positive attitude for learning instead of fighting. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you, dads. Well, that's going to do it for today's Faith Nation. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great night.